How is rail preservation improved when we go beyond just looking at the equipment and try to preserve a full industrial site? Today on the Roundhouse, we're going to learn about the Flour by Rail project. All aboard!
In days past, the roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to the Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Ozerak, and this is episode number 131 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we're talking about everything in the industry and hobby. You name it, and we discuss it. The Roundhouse podcast is a Streamliner Media production. We specialize in digital media strategies with an emphasis on video. But today we're podcasting, and today we are talking to Luke Irvine and Charlie Monte Verde of the Flour by Rail project, which is a nonprofit organization based in Buffalo, New York, that is preserving part of the industrial landscape pertaining to the flour industry in that area. We're going to learn about their initiatives, what pieces of equipment have been saved, and what property they have to be able to tell this story. We're also going to get a sneak peek at what to expect with the recent purchase of a rare ALCO PA diesel locomotive by Genesee Valley Transportation, because one of our guests, Charlie Monte Verde, also happens to be the vice president of Genesee Valley Transportation. Before we get to that, though, I want to thank those of you who are supporting the Roundhouse on patreon.com/the Roundhouse, and for as little as $1 a month, you're helping to support the show and what we're doing here. And maybe 91 and Thomas Billington have signed up as historians on Patreon. That means that they are getting this shout out. And Logan Day has joined as a loco fitter, meaning he is listening to this episode early. So if you want to get early access to episodes and other benefits, go to patreon.com/the Roundhouse. I really appreciate all of the support that you guys on Patreon are providing to the show. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of today's episode. First, the Strasburg Railroad. Learn more about how their mechanical services department can help with your restoration project by emailing mechanical@strasburgrailroad.com. And Rail and Road Auctions, which specializes in railroad collectibles and memorabilia. You can see what auctions they have coming up at bidrar.com. Our guests today are overseeing the Flour by Rail project, which is this really incredibly nifty industrial preservation initiative. I'm joined by Vice President and Director of Buffalo USA Foundation, Luke Irvine, and the founder and president of Buffalo USA Foundation, who just also happens to be the Vice President of Strategic Planning at Genesee Valley Transportation, Charlie Monte Verde. Welcome.
Thanks, Nick. Really glad to be here. Pumped about this.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so good to be able to have you on the show to talk about Flour by Rail. But the obvious question is, what is Flour by Rail? And Charlie, I'm wondering if you could introduce us to this.
Sure. So the Flour by Rail Legacy Project is the flagship initiative of our Buffalo USA Foundation. We are a 501c3 community development charity. This specific initiative's goal is to preserve and return historic flour-carrying boxcars back to the Buffalo riverfront silos that they once served, looking to reuse them as educational interpretive exhibit space on the rail, industrial, and the lake boat to rail car history of Buffalo that it really told Buffalo's entire story until the widening of the St. Lawrence Seaway kind of changed things here. So looking to educate on that history and the car and the Buffalo Creek Railroad Buffalo Creek Railroad's role in all of that, as well as providing exhibit space and community shared event space that ties into the numerous events that go on at Silo City and and within Buffalo's burgeoning Old First Ward neighborhood on the immediate south side of the city on the Buffalo River and just across from the Lake Erie beaches.
What is Silo City?
So Silo City is a multi-use development, the redevelopment of which has picked up in the past 3 to 4 years, especially. It's the silos that made up the former Burroughs lot, was the area that was the Pennsylvania Railroad Yard actually that served them. It's the largest existing remaining cluster of silos for various processes that still exist in Buffalo. And ConAgra was the last active mill in there, rail served until 1998, I think. And subsequent to the useful life of all the silos there, concluding Rick Smith, who owns Rigidized Metals, third generation in a family business there, which is immediately adjacent to these silos. He had bought up these silos just kind of on a spec and looking at the direction that Buffalo was going or could be going in its renaissance. And piece by piece, they've been restoring different buildings for mixed use. The old malt house there is actually being restored for condominiums. And in addition to that, it's kind of a industrial utopia space. They take the excess runoff water from the silos and run that through aquifers to a koi pond. There's different nature installations there, and Explore Buffalo, the big tour company in Buffalo, does tours across the grounds there. So the whole thing is a comprehensive, like I said, sort of industrial reuse utopia. And we're very fortunate to be there. And we see what we're doing with the boxcars being a very natural fit in that.
So what led to the formation of this project?
So Luke and I are both Rochester kids. So, you know, for the entirety of our existence, we were aware that there was a 40-foot Buffalo Creek boxcar in CSX's Goodman Street Yard, you know, condo before that, of course, being used as a maintenance away shed. I spent 10 years in Chicago, actually working for Amtrak and their government affairs group. But with GBT Rail as a family business, with that in the background, with that as an opportunity, if I wanted to come home, there was always the possibility that that would happen. And if it were, even though I'm a Rochester kid, and same for Luke, there was no doubt that I'd be choosing Buffalo to move back to. And Chicago was kind of spoken for as a city, and its economic renaissance has already sort of occurred. But Buffalo, there's something of a blank canvas to it. And if I were going to come home, I wanted to be involved in that renaissance. And knowing that this car existed in Goodman Street Yard, I figured that if I wanted to get involved, wanted to make some news and be a part of the community, that the idea of returning this car from Rochester back to its home rails would be a great opportunity to do that. And basically, with the pandemic happening, I'm sort of an introvert extrovert person. So the idea of stay inside and stay away from everybody, I knew that might suit me a little too well. So I decided to set this trap for myself that during the pandemic, we started to build a media campaign and get a fundraiser going to return this first boxcar to Buffalo and to Silo City. And you know, we'll talk about that. We were successful in that, but it's an idea to get involved in a renaissance that's ongoing in Buffalo already, and we've come in at a great time to do this.
It sounds like you have. Luke, what is the extent of the property that you own right now?
Well, as Charlie said, this boxcar is located down at Silo City next to Rigidized Metals, who has been an absolutely great partner in this project so far. We don't own any property per se, but we own the boxcar, which is a Buffalo Creek PS1 boxcar number 1424. It's built in August 1952 at Pullman's Michigan City plant as part of the first class of boxcars bearing the Crick's iconic flower bag logo that a lot of us young rail fans, grew up seeing pictures of, but most of them were already long past retirement by the time people like Charlie and myself were watching trains go by on the main line. So, we don't own it yet, but we do have a handshake agreement in place with the good folks over at the Western New York Railway Historical Society, which is a fairly large presence in the Western New York and Buffalo area. They have a pretty robust collection, including that Pennsylvania steam locomotive in Hamburg, New York. But we have that handshake agreement to acquire Buffalo Creek Boxcar 4578 to join her sister over there at Silo City. It's currently in the museum's collection over in Hamburg, but we're hoping to move that to Silo City in the near future.
That's the funny thing is that it took me a long time to even realize that there was a time when flour was being hauled in boxcars. Now we think of them as a covered hopper commodity. So the story alone of just having these boxcars by silos and being able to communicate that no, these things that you associate with hauling general merchandise could actually haul flour is something that I think could be certainly educational to the general public, but even to some rail fans who might not specialize in that era of history. And with the partnership that you're building with the Historical Society, what are some of the ways in which this agreement you see as being beneficial to their mission as well as to yours?
Well, I think that, like many organizations, there was a lot of opportunity years ago to acquire a lot of this equipment. And in many situations, there wasn't an opportunity to move it to a centralized location or to, actually, build the volunteer base that you needed or, the staffing levels that you needed to, do something with everything. So, with that, we've also extended an opportunity to the Historical Society to acquire a Dunmore caboose from its current location, which is actually over at Silo City, believe it or not, to expand our collection and our exhibit at, the location. So, there's a lot of opportunity there for us to, help them, restore some of their equipment and to, put it on exhibit for the public to enjoy for years to come.
Besides this partnership, Charlie, what are some of the other initial successes that you've had in the campaign?
It's big and small, not quite too many to list rather, but it's the media coverage that we had started with Buffalo's alternative newspaper. Shout out to Buffalo Rising. They were the first to cover this initiative in its very bare bones state of that we had a GoFundMe fundraiser put up, but hadn't had momentum for it yet. They were great in starting the ball rolling, and we've since had coverage in every local news outlet except for one. So it's been well covered, and that helped with the initial fundraising. We raised about $3,500 via the GoFundMe. As we kind of talked about earlier, maybe before the podcast or maybe right at the start, but reaching an audience beyond just the rail fan, rail enthusiast community, because as much as that's us, we're city kids too, and it invested in the greater good and the history of this. So we found a reach that extends just beyond folks that want to see a Buffalo Creek boxcar restored. And then certainly finding a home for initiative and a willing, enthusiastic partner in Mr. Smith and the Rigidized Metals team and Silo City teams, being so open to having this be a home for this car and asking for nothing in return except initiative, motivation, and participation. As we've said throughout this, and we'll keep saying, railroading is a very small world. You know, you're only a couple of degrees of separation away from anybody in the industry, really. And probably our biggest success to date has been contacts that we had at CSX, making us aware that there was a $10,000 community development grant available that unfortunately another museum was not going to be able to utilize. And since this was before we had our 501c3 designation, we worked with our friends and partners at the Rochester and Genesee Valley Railroad Museum to have them be the eligible 501c3 applicant for the grant. They were successful in their application, and that money was utilized to sign up Winters Rigging out of North Collins, New York, to load and transport BCK 1424, that's 77 miles from Goodman Street Yard in Rochester to the ground at Silo City. If you check out the EDO Trains YouTube channel, we've got a video right on there, including a painstaking time lapse of the car arriving at Silo City, and then it actually came in on its side, which is how they move cars like this, with its trucks on a separate trailer. And then it was slowly lifted back to upright and dropped on its trucks to the place where we see it now. And that's on EDO Trains YouTube. And then just through our railroading and Railfen Network, being able to trace the history of the car. We posted a picture of the intact ACI tag on Facebook, and that was enough for, you know, friends and family on Facebook to identify the car number from the ACI tag, which, you know, who knew, right? Illinois Railroad Museum, Ed Hawkins, who's kind of the authority on 40-foot boxcars, they provided great info from their Pullman Company material archive collection. And then just starting the cars there, we know what it is, we know what the history is, starting in on the physical restoration with whatever kind of volunteer and skill sets we can get. We were able to obtain full height ladders from a 40-foot boxcar that was being cut up, which we're using to replace the Buffalo Creek's ladders that have been cut down subsequent to the 1974 roof walk ban for boxcars. Reapplying those ladders in the coming weeks. And just in general, we're very fortunate in that compared to other 40-foot boxcars, namely they had a use like this as MOW sheds before the advent of containers. This car is in, I would say, immaculate condition as 40-foot boxcars go. It's, for any railroad that's had it, it's been taken care of. And you don't see a lot of the sill and side panel corrosion issues that we see at GVT with some of the 40-foot boxcars we've saved. Even you don't see that with this car, and it makes for such a great starting point for a startup organization like Buffalo USA Foundation to build off of, to have something that really needs what I would say minimal work before it's going to be painted. And by the way, last thing, if you ever are going to bring an old boxcar into your life, make sure that your landlord is a sheet metal fabrication company, because that is key to this.
That certainly sounds like a great convenience to have on a whole host of fronts. And what a great degree of partnership that you have, and the fact that there's this support for the project that's going beyond even just the immediate region, but looking at the region itself. So I grew up in Meadville, PA, so just a couple of hours south of Buffalo, and traveled to Buffalo frequently enough to get a sense of how it, like Meadville, is very much of that Rust Belt, and how there are strong efforts to redevelop and find a new identity. but the challenges associated with that. And I think that in the rail preservation world, when people think of Buffalo, a lot of people think of the Buffalo Central Terminal and the struggles that have existed to get that preserved properly. Luke, I'm wondering how what you are working on with Flower by Rail ties in with redevelopment efforts that are taking place in Buffalo itself, as well as the Western New York region.
Well, like you, Nick, I spent a lot of time in Buffalo as a kid. I can remember after we moved to Rochester in approximately 1993 or so, my dad knew that my brother and I had a pretty strong interest in trains. So one of my first memories ever, to Charlie's point, is actually my dad taking me to the Goodman Street Yard when Conrail was still in existence in Rochester. So very aware of what was there and, what could be. And in the early 90s, mid 90s, when we started coming out to Buffalo, like you said, it was more of a Rust Belt city. There wasn't I don't want to say there wasn't a lot going on here, but it was very industrialized still. It wasn't, the flourishing metropolis that, I think it is today. So there's a lot of really great stuff going on in the area. There's Riverworks right near Silo City. Like Charlie has said, this industrial reuse utopia that Rigidized Metals and the owner Rick has really turned into a really cool spot. There's he's got a restaurant and a bar over there. There's the High Line, not to be confused with the High Line in New York City, but the High Line that is going to be constructed through the Tiff Nature Preserve on the old Lackawanna Railroad right of way there. That's a really important thing. And, last but not least, certainly not least, is some of the Buffalo Central Terminal restoration efforts that are really ongoing, not too far from us, even though it's a little bit outside of the city. But there's a lot of great stuff going on down there. There's a lot of bars, restaurants. One of the big things for us, and, Charlie has said it time and time again here throughout this podcast, is, partners and support from, some people, not only railroaders and people that work on the railroad, but from outside that as well. We've got a partnership going on here with the West Shore Brewery in Clarence, New York, named after the New York West Shore and Buffalo Railroad. And we work with Josh DeZombo over there, and he recently brewed us a beer. So if you're like me and you like a cold beer on a summer day, we're going to be releasing that very shortly with him, sometime hopefully in April, and it's going to be called Lake to Rail Lager. So we're hoping to not only debut that in April, but we're hoping to have an event at his brewery to support his brewery. Hopefully get it on tap at a couple of the local restaurants, in downtown Buffalo. And of course, Charlie mentioned our partnership with the great folks over at Rochester and Genesee Valley Railroad Museum. They have an awesome event coming up in May called Rails and Ales. We're hoping to have a little bit of a event there for West Shore Brewing and Flower by Rail Legacy Project, and support that initiative as well.
Excellent. That is good that you're finding that support to be able to not just the financial benefits, the benefits of connecting with other people and being able to communicate what these short-term and these long-term goals are to be able to gain support that. Which, speaking of which, Charlie, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Well, certainly job one is a complete physical restoration of BCK 1424. Not even speaking to the painting process at this point, but Rigidized, our great partner there, they removed the left side door of the car last year, and they took it down. They've straightened out at some point a forklift hit the upper left of the door, and just a little impact dent where it didn't close all the way. And then they've repaired that, and they're also doing work to replace the, I hate that I'm not going to use the right term, but your outside door braces. It's your classic 6-panel superior door. So those braces have collected water over the years. So among the very few heavy physical, welding involved tasks that we have for the exterior of this car is finishing the door. The other big one for significant exterior work is repairing and placing the metal where the roof line rolled over to meet the end of the car. At opposite corners where the high ladders used to come up to meet the roof walk, there's corrosion. So there's corrosion in this corner and corrosion on the corner opposite. And as I said in here, a free Fly-by-Rail t-shirt to you, Nick, if you can guess what caused that corrosion at those opposite corners where the roof walk came to the ladders. Go ahead.
Sounds like a question of the day, Nick.
It sounds like a question of the day, but I'm not used to being put on the hot seat myself for being able to answer. I mean, I'm going to guess that that if you didn't have a fully sealed roof, being able to have water coming in between the panels.
Yeah, I mean it's the roof, you know, and the roof is always the thing, right? House, boxcar, shed, doghouse, whatever it is, outhouse. The roof, a good roof is the key, and the roof on this is pretty immaculate, but at the corners where it's rotted out, I'm pretty sure it's because where the roof walk came over to meet the ladders, you had icicles hanging off down the roof walk there. Not that we have a lot of icicles and cold weather in Buffalo, you know what I mean? But pretty sure it's some icicles rotting that out. So that's that, and the door are kind of the last exterior pieces, and then interior of the car is beautiful. I mean, we want folks to come down and see it obviously too, but it's the original yellow pine floor is intact, and most of the better Douglas fir plywood lining is largely still intact. We're working to replace any missing pieces or water damaged pieces, which again is quite minimal. And from there, it has a cork ceiling for insulation. So it's, for us, it's blowing off the loose cork, applying a rubber roof to the interior. And between that inside, outside roof work, the door work, and any little bits of body work, the short-term goal is get this car physically hardy. Medium term, we're working with University of Buffalo Art School on a mural for the right side of the car, which is the side facing the silos. With the car in solid condition, weather tight, ready to be painted, getting the car open for tours, tie it into the numerous events that they have at Rigidized Metals in Silo City on the grounds right there where the car is. And as we said, interpretive and exhibit space inside, a merchandise shop for the foundation, and all the while acquiring fundraising, performing fundraising, acquiring grants to paint the car. In that medium term period there too, if the BCK 1424 is very solid, then we move on to working and fundraising to relocate the next car, the BCK 4578, to the site, to compile the restoration scope, understand what we need to do there, and long term, paint the first car. And when everything except painting has occurred for that second car, when all that body work and it's in a good solid state that we trust, relocate the exhibits to that second car. And we don't know what the vendor is yet, but use the current car, BCK 1424, use that as some kind of creative vendor space for something. It to me, as a space for a commercial venture that supports the foundation goes, this thing just screams out for becoming an ice cream shop down there.
The Strasburg Railroad is an institution in the heritage railroad industry, and its mechanical services department is proud to lead the way. With the knowledge and experience that has created one of the most reliable steam railroading experiences in the country, the Strasburg Railroad is excited to offer their expertise to the rest of the industry. Strasburg's professional team provides consulting and technical assistance to take your steam locomotive or railcar project from idea to finished product. They stand behind their work and always strive to meet their customers' needs for quality, historic accuracy, and reliability at a price that is fair. Unlike many competitors, they feature a fully equipped boiler, rail car, and machine shop, so the work gets done in-house, helping you to get more for your money. Send your inquiries to mechanical@strasburgrailroad.com and let the professionals get to work for you. I'm curious in general what you envision to be on your GoFundMe. There is an architectural drawing showcasing what this site can look like. But Luke, what do you envision the public experience to be when it's all said and done? Once these goals have been realized, what are people going to be able to do, and how is this going to provide an experience for people?
Well, as you mentioned there, Charlie's got some pretty neat artwork there that is on our Facebook page and our websites, and all the various places that we've posted this information, as well as a GoFundMe. Ideally, I would love to see a former Buffalo Creek ALCO S2 down there with somewhere between 1 and 3 boxcars, and maybe a caboose. All dependent on real estate. The area down there next to the building too has a large lawn and like green space, and it's adjacent to this nature preserve that a lot of people take walks and tours through. What I can see in the future here is I can see West Shore Brewing have a satellite location at one of the boxcars with our beer, another boxcar with ice cream for the kids or the people that don't want to have a drink on a warm summer day, a caboose for kids to sit in and get their photos taken. A really cool old ALCO locomotive. We have our eyes on one that we'll talk about at a later time and date, but we think that would be really cool. And a bunch of picnic tables. People could just sit outside and enjoy the warm weather. And like Charlie said, it's right on Lake Erie. It's a really beautiful area. That's what I see it as, a family space. I see it as a place for families to come and July and August and just hang out and enjoy the scenery and make it a part of their routine.
Especially to be able to do something for locals. That seems that there's certainly going to be a draw, especially for fans of industrial history, to the region, because there's so much to take in industrial history in Buffalo in general. And that this will contribute to that. But to have something for locals to be able to appreciate and continue to foster those relationships seems really valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah, we would love to see, we don't know where this mural project's going to go yet, but, we'd love to, see some sort of industrial exhibit there, an interpretive display of some description in one of the boxcars too. Again, it all depends on how much equipment we actually end up acquiring at the end of the day and what the real estate looks like once that stuff is there. But that'd be really good. And of course we'll have to put the Buffalo Bills there on the mural somehow, somewhere. So
that it sounds good to me, but I say that as somebody who's not tethered to sports too heavily one way or another. So some of you listening might have your issues with that, but but yes, if you're going to be in Buffalo, way to support the home team. And when it comes to support, what are things that people can do to help make this happen?
Well, one of the things that prompted me to actually, reach out to you to see if we could do this podcast today was one of your recent episodes, and it was specifically tailored to, I think it was one of your panel discussions regarding volunteerism in the rail preservation community. We've struggled with it greatly since we started this project. I'm involved in a couple other places like the Rochester Genesee Valley Railroad Museum. I know they struggle with getting volunteer help. I volunteer at the Adirondack Railway Preservation Society out in Utica and up in Thendara. We all struggle with getting people to come in and donate their time. So one of the things that we need help with is we need help getting people to come and help us. And we need people to want to be a part of this stuff so that it's preserved not only for us now, but for, my children. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we need help with is spreading the word. And, I took a lot away from that podcast that you did, that panel discussion. There are a lot of really great ideas on there. And there's a lot of really great people in that community, which is a community unto itself outside of the railroad. You know, these guys are railroaders, sure, but they're also rail preservationists, and that's a special talent in and of itself, like I said. So, you know, partnerships. You know, like I said, we're really lucky to have a plethora of great people that have been willing to drop everything and help us move this forward. And, you know, admittedly, it's for a lot of people, it's not, you know, just looking at it, it's not as exciting as preserving a locomotive or, you know, firing up a steam locomotive. They're like a boxcar, you know, oh, it's just a boxcar. But, you know, truth be told, there's been a lot of people that, you know, they see our vision, they see the renderings that Charlie's done, and they're like, hey, this could be really cool. This could be something, and it could be something different. So, you know, we want to partner with, you know, as many people as we can and move this project forward. And like I said, anybody that's out there listening, you know, go volunteer at your local museum, go volunteer at your local railroad, go volunteer for a nonprofit like this. You know, the rewards are huge.
Freight cars do so often get overlooked when it comes to preservation because, yes, we get it. The locomotive is the first thing that you see on the train. It's the thing that makes the loudest degree of noise, or should be. If your freight car is making more noise than your engine, there's probably something off with your freight car. But the thing for me personally is I love being able to see things in context. So when museums have a period freight train, and tourist railroads have period freight trains that they can bring up for charters or special events. To me, that helps to convey a different side of railroad history beyond what I get when I'm just riding a passenger train. No matter how complete you might say that passenger train may be, it's such a different feel to it. And I think that hopefully as your project gains more recognition in the years to come and more people are seeing what's going on with that it goes into a reevaluation in general of the importance of preserving freight cars, preserving industrial sites, preserving them together, so that we have more places that are working to encapsulate this history, not just from here's a piece of equipment or here's a piece of the story, but tries to create more of an immersive experience throughout.
Absolutely. You know, I'd be remiss in not mentioning one of the funny stories of this whole project. And, you know, I think Charlie mentioned it, but the ladders here for this car are from a parts donor. And, you know, one of the other things I would tell people out there is if you see something that you think is worth saving, try and save it like we did. You know, one of our first subjects here was a New York Central 40-foot boxcar that was located over at the Frontier Yard. And it was one of the first places Charlie and I got together to start looking at, you know, what we were going to do is before we moved this boxcar and everything. And, you know, there's a bunch of equipment over there that was scheduled to be scrapped. We knew it was supposed to be scheduled to, for scrap. And, you know, so we showed up and there was a sign there that, you know, said that, you know, so-and-so was scrapping stuff. And there was huge piles of box cars and tank cars and flat cars and stuff that were getting recycled. So Charlie and I sat there and we thought to ourselves, well, I hope they don't cut this up. So we spray painted "Do Not Scrap" on the side of this boxcar. Yeah, wouldn't you know it, the next week they showed up and they still stuck an excavator through the roof of this thing. So needless to say, it became a parts donor, and you know, those ladders will, you know, go on for future use on our Buffalo Creek boxcars, you know. So, but you know, that's one of my funny stories there. But you know, I like to give everybody a good chuckle on these podcasts.
You gotta lose on your way to winning sometimes, I think. Yeah, right.
So,
and it's a good reminder to all of us that if you really want it, if you really think it's important, you got to take the opportunity when it presents itself, because you may see a piece of equipment that's been sitting on your rail spur for years, if not decades, and easy to think, oh, it'll be there tomorrow. And tomorrow comes, and all of a sudden, wait, what happened to that? And the good news would be that it moved to a museum, and the bad news would be that it was scrapped. So it's always important to take advantage of it. Last question on this particular topic for each of you, and Charlie, we'll start with you. At the end of the day, what makes you most excited about this project and what you're looking to accomplish?
Well, I would say it's the blank canvas aspect of this project. I mean, as we said, we know locomotives are sexier, but by having choosing to use box cars and choosing to have to do something where you're creating this creative space it's sort of notch 8 wide open on what you can do with these space. I would say exciting for me personally, and not to belabor too many stories, but this was the ConAgra and Burroughs lot contract switching there when lake boats were still bringing grain in, and they were still processing the flour and shipping out by rail right there. That's GVT Rail's origins right there. That's between that and our Depew, Lancaster, and Western. That's our first operation, was the switching contract there. I can still picture these silos in active service, and they are no less like standing in front of the pyramids of Giza now than they were, when I was half the height of what I am now. And so our business has origins there, and there's a lot that's kind of fallen into place and lined up about this project between that history, and there happened to be a CSX grant available to do this move, and the partnership and seeing the same sort of determined collectedness in Luke and I that Rick saw in himself to say yes to us bringing this car on. A lot of things have lined up, and the community support, the city of good neighbors reputation that Buffalo has of organizations wanting to be helpful, wanting to get involved, not asking for anything in return, which is always a tough thing, for a good Catholic like myself, as you feel the shame of not something in return, but that willingness for folks to do that and help us with this is really exciting, and gives you a refreshed feeling of initiative to want to make a go of this, embracing Luke and myself as Buffalo outsiders looking to be a part of the Renaissance here. That's been huge, and everything about the fundraising to this point, feedback, and people's willingness to be involved. Like I said, we need more of that. Facebook.com/flourbyrail. I'm sure we'll reiterate that. That's our page. And flour, of course, is, as I tell my phone voice text, flour is spelled FLOUR, not FLOWER in this case. To follow the restoration there and join us in getting this work done. We're 501c3 now, so there's a tax deductible element to folks volunteering their time, resources, or whatever to be a part of this. And just what we've seen to date from that is really, it's more than exciting, and makes us feel very confident in the future of this effort.
And I'll just piggyback off of what Charlie said too, and not to plagiarize JFK, but ask not what the boxcar can do for you, but ask what you can do for the boxcar, or in this case, the rail preservation community at large. So we can't reiterate enough. We need volunteers. All of these organizations need volunteers, and sometimes it's not what it can do for you, but what you can do for it. So.
This episode of the Roundhouse is brought to you by Rail and Road Auctions. You can find all types of railroad collectibles, including signs, signals, horns, locks, keys, lanterns, timetables, passes, and more. With opening bids of only $10 on many lots, you'll be sure to find something to add to your collection or train room. Rail and Road also offers fast and easy shipping right to your doorstep, and they combine multiple live and online sales methods to allow you a variety of purchasing options. And you can view the full catalog now at www.bidrar.com. That's bidrar.com. Rail and Road Auctions, where real railroaders and rail fans build their collections. Transitioning from talking about freight ALCOs, potential for freight ALCOs, to passenger ALCOs. We're gonna ask you, Charlie, to put on your GVT hat now, because obviously, I say obviously, some people might not have heard the news, but for those who aren't familiar, Genesee Valley Transportation has acquired an ALCO PA streamliner locomotive, one of only a handful in existence, from Doyle McCormick. excuse me, the owner of 4449 Daylight, and previously the owner of this locomotive, and you will be using it in some capacity. So let's talk about that, Charlie. How did this purchase come to be?
Amazingly, right? I mean, just the entire history of this locomotive and its three sisters, which still exist, of course, too. The entire history of them existing still is remarkable. It's the vision of Bruce Sturzing at the D&H to just buy the four of these at the Delaware and Hudson, to buy the four of these off the Santa Fe Railroad, you know, when they were past their useful life there, to use them in their excursion train service. And then not only that, but to get them rebuilt to power D&H's leg of the Adirondack train from Albany to Montreal. But then the fact that they went to Mexico and they kind of had a rough few years of service there, and it kind of became one would go out of service and become parts for the other until there was only one left, and then one got rolled, and then they were mothballed. And to like for Charlie, for Luke, for Nick, these things were gone. They were gone. They were gone before we existed, and they were somewhere high in the mountains of Mexico, that in a place where you're likely only going there, right, as a rail fan, because you know those are there. And what Mr. McCormick did with his Smithsonian, as far as I know, the State Department, to strike a deal to bring two of these locomotives back home, was as remarkable as the rest of the history. When I was still with Amtrak in late 2018, I'd moved from government affairs to the long distance service line. And on a day off when we were visiting Portland, Oregon, I said, I got to go see this, which is just a pilgrimage at this point. It's just, I need to just see a PA. You're not thinking of anything beyond that, right? And in talking with Mr. McCormick about it, and, not trying to seem over eager or disingenuous, I did offer that, like, hey, if there's ever a change or anything like this and you're looking to move on from it, we're the ALCO road, B, we'd provide a good home for it, C, it would be on home rails, and D, we would be absolutely honored to have the chance to acquire it. So when it's about a month ago or so now, he reached out and mentioned that just he's getting to the point where it's time for a change for the PA. I started getting our business plan together on covering the cost to acquire this, and but luckily for us, our board had the foresight to know the significance of this locomotive and what it could mean to a railroad like ours, just in general, as a short line, to have a locomotive like this. Not even to mention the fact that it's the beauty queen. It's the best looking locomotive ever built. That's perfectly subjective, but that's my subjective take on it. And the fact that we are the largest operator of ALCO and Montreal Locomotive Works diesels in the world at this point, it was just such a perfect fit, and could hardly believe that we were going to be given the opportunity to obtain this. And then, like I said, the foresight of our board to make that move. And come next month, it's going to make its trip from second trip across the country after going to the Spencer Streamliner event. It'll make its trip back across the country, back to home rails in Scranton, to our brand new Von Storch locomotive shops, where we'll take a look at the PA and build off of the 20 years of sweat, tears, dollars, and personal time and everything that Mr. McCormick put in this PA. We're going to figure out what the last steps are to get her operational and get her out there on our railroad on office car trains, excursion trains, etc., for the first mainline PA usage in the United States in about 45 years at this point.
It's so nifty online. Somewhere I'd seen a photo, and maybe it was your company that had posted it, where the Von Storch locomotive shops are now, compared to something like 45 years ago, same exact angle and location. The shops weren't there. There was a yard, but see the ALCO PA coming through that same scene.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be so nifty to be able to do a recreation of that once you have the actual locomotive to do it with.
Right. And that it was, I certainly, in just looking for pictures of this PA 18 in service on the D&H, to happen to have stumbled across this image of it on the lead of a D&H train coming around the curve where we just built these shops, and being able to, and reaching out to Mr. McCormick, just do a before and after picture of, you know, what was and what so very much is now. It was certainly part of the pitch for this, but just like it's still fairly unbelievable that this can be a reality for that, and soon, right?
So very soon. It's really interesting to see how your company has embraced ALCOs, and the fact you talk about the board level discussions to make this happen. The commitment that you have to ALCO locomotives and Montreal locomotive built locomotives that were based off of ALCO designs. Obviously, rail fans love ALCOs. They're this really wonderful mechanical machine that reminds you that it is a mechanical machine. But the fact is that you guys are able to make this work not just from a sake of nostalgia, not just because you love them, but that there is a business case for this. What is it about these locomotives that has made them so successful for the GVT family of properties?
Well, that 251 prime mover is pretty reliable. But I mean, right from go, we've been in ALCO road, obviously, right? And we start off with a half ALCO, Lehigh Valley 211, that is, of course, now at the Rochester and Genesee Valley Railroad Museum. And we leased that out to the Rochester and Southern Railroad, which, of course, was the first expansion of the now multi-global universal Genesee and Wyoming. When they first expanded and bought the old Buffalo Railroad in Pittsburgh from Chessie System, they were short on power. So we, our initial owner group and some other guys had bought this locomotive. They leased at the RNS. They took the money from that and used that to pay for liability insurance and everything else regulatory they need to form a railroad. We were able to bid on and win the contract for what's been our Depew, Lancaster, and Western Railroad on Erie County property here in Buffalo. That's since 1989. But then and now, it's been the same kind of pragmatism and practicality. Yeah, you know, we all love the nostalgia aspect and the uniquity aspect of running these ALCOs. But in the late 80s, early 90s, when we were first starting to build out our fleet and expanding the railroad and the need for locomotives, ALCOs were what was being retired everywhere by any class ones that still had them. So in addition to good runners, you had good part locomotives readily available. And, you know, folks will ask now, or the topic comes up about our world post ALCOs, you know, because there is always the possibility at some point, even though the parts are used in offshore drilling and marine tug applications, as far as the prime movers and other parts, as much as they continue to be made and available, maybe there's a world post ALCOs, but like at this point, we don't see that. And the topic comes up, why not replace the ALCOs with Jeep 40s or Jeep 50s or whatever? And what it comes down to is we're going to replace a 50-year-old locomotive with another 50-year-old locomotive. There's just no reasonable, affordable market for 4-axle road switchers that the short line and regional railroads can tap into as a replacement for these. We're not looking to replace them anyways. I got to make that clear. because there was a rumor that Charlie was going to replace the ALCOs that was on the internet for about 20 years. But like we're not looking to do that, and we don't want to do that. And at this point, there's you just be replacing in kind with something else built in the 60s, 70s, or early 80s, and that's the fleet we have now. We make it work. Parts are available. We've had a great historic apprentice program. So knowing that we have kind of this a unique mechanical product, we've been able to focus on making sure that we keep our people that can maintain and of course run these. And so at this point, it's until further notice, really. And that those same principles apply for the PA. I mean, like I said, Doyle has done amazing work on it. And being able to take this to our system shops in Scranton, our brand new system shops in Scranton, and let it get the work it needs there to become a runner. This is really kind of the bubble on the champagne of a long history of saving and restoring to functional daily operational use ALCO locomotives, and the PA is kind of the trophy on top of all that.
That's a really good way of putting it. If one wants to get a sense of how dependable these things are as far as an ALCO prime mover, because I bet a lot of people done this, maybe you don't know this, the crawler transporters that NASA used for transporting the space shuttles from the vehicle assembly building to the launch pad are powered by ALCOs.
I'll be damned. I did not know that.
Specifically to 2,750 horsepower ALCO 251C prime movers. So if NASA's doing it and sending shuttles to space with it,
yeah,
then there's probably good reason to stick with that as a technology. This has been an absolutely great conversation with you, Charlie and Luke. I'm so glad that you came on the show today to talk about all of this excitement with the ALCO PA and with Flower by Rail. That is going to be a really fun project to watch evolve over the coming years. So there's a link in the show notes for you to check that out. Guys, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Nick, for having us. This has been great. Yeah, for sure.
Before we get to the question of the day, I want to add to our conversation and say that if you are interested in learning more about the Buffalo Creek Railroad, there's a book coming out from Garbly Publishing Company called First of Its Kind, The Buffalo Creek Railroad, Volume 1, covering the years 1868 to 1950, printed by my friend Rudy Garbly. You can pre-order your copy from Garbly Publishing Company at garblypublishing.com. Also have a link in the show notes for episode number 131 if you want to click that instead.
And now, the question of the day.
Last time on the Roundhouse, we were talking to a panel of marketing experts about how to sell your tourist railroad, museum, fundraiser, experience that you offer to the public, which was a very good conversation. I encourage you to check it out if you haven't listened to it already. But the question of the day that came out of that discussion was, when have you donated to a cause or visited a tourist railroad or museum specifically due to the marketing? Ed Lokaya writes, I'm a sucker for preservation projects that are being managed by teenagers or young adults, especially realistic projects that appear to have a good plan in place. I agree with that entirely. I think that it is always great to see youth-led projects. If your organization, even if it's not rail related, if your organization has a core youth component, highlight that. Clinton Webb writes, maybe not directly due to marketing, but different organizations have caught my attention through their marketing efforts of specific projects or initiatives. Then I donated after seeing their progress or updates. So indirectly, yes. Your question of the day for this episode is, what example of preserving an industrial site are you enthusiastic about? It doesn't necessarily need to be rail related, just industry. Let me know on the roundhousepodcast.com. Links to social media are there. Guys, it is always a treat to have you along for the ride for these episodes. and hopefully you enjoy listening to them. If you have feedback, please reach out to me through social media or the roundhousepodcast.com. And remember, as always, that the Roundhouse is our house.